Hello, and welcome to the Neutral Zone Hotel, an unapologetically left-leaning podcast covering hockey at its best and worst. My name is Trevor. My pronouns are he, him. I'm very thrilled to be your concierge tonight. And before I introduce my guest, I would also like to say I would like to issue a 5-minute major, a game misconduct, and a lifetime suspension to the idiot who came up with the idea of daylight time savings, because it has absolutely destroyed me over the last couple days. Also, I'm a regretful hometown Canucks fan. And with me today is just one of my colleagues, but nevertheless, she is very important.
Hi, I'm Alex. My pronouns are she, her. I am your local Pittsburgh Penguins fan. And I actually really appreciated the fact that daylight savings happened this week, because I really liked being able to drive around with there being light out at 6:30 p.m. on Sunday. That was
Okay, fair. But like when you have to wake up at 3 a.m, which means you have to go to bed at 9 the night before.
Yeah.
And your body's telling you, it's like, no, it's 8, you idiot. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
It's not. Let's sleep. And your body's like, hey, no, we're not going to go to sleep till like midnight, sucker. Deal with it.
I only have to wake up at 6, so it wasn't as bad for me.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, no, yesterday was really rough. It was a little bit better today. But yeah, no, lifetime suspension. Shame on you.
My take on daylight savings will for always be your opinion on daylight savings depends strongly on A, what your values are, and B, where you live geographically, how close to a time zone boundary you live, where you live north, south, because what the solution is would be varies based off of your geography, which is one of the biggest reasons we don't have a solution other than dealing with the hour change. Everyone agrees the change sucks. No one can agree on what they should do to solve it. Anyway, that's not why you're listening to this podcast, unless you really care about two randos' thoughts on daylight savings time. You're listening to this podcast because you want to hear us talk, or hear me talk about the trip that I took to a 10,000 person strong Chappelle Rowan sing along. Also known as the March 7th PWHL Takeover Tour game in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah. Thank you for teeing that one right up. So yeah, said Takeover Tour game featuring the Ottawa Charge as the road team against the Minnesota Frost as the home team. Last time you and I were both on, we covered how you would be cheering for the Frost.
It was the right decision.
Which is fine. Yeah, holy smokes, was it ever, because that game was not close.
Nope. And the best part is, in part because it was a neutral start game, in part because it was an event, in part because it was a live hockey game, the fact that it wasn't close did not matter at all unless you were coming in as a extremely die-hard Ottawa Charge fan. Which was, there were certainly a couple there, but it was not the crowd. It was so much fun.
Mm. I'm very glad to hear that.
It's one of those things where every so often you go and you remember, oh yeah, live hockey rocks. Watching it live, watching it with the audience, the collective, universal unison, ooh, when a player has a breakaway, the cheer and eruption, followed by the slow confusion when you realize that thing that was a goal, that looked like a goal from your view in the seats, wasn't, because it didn't actually go in the net, which was the first shot of the game. Watching hockey rocks.
Yeah.
And it's such a different experience versus the standard NHL games, because it was genuinely a different crowd, a lot more young kids, a lot more women, a lot more. It's a lot more accessible because the cost
Yeah.
of the tickets was like half of what it cost for a Hurricane ticket.
Mm-hmm. It's
And
just a different vibe, you
yeah,
know?
and it was so much fun. The highlights for me are like the action on the ice was awesome, but like just the vibes of being in an arena and like everyone's still in their seats at the intermissions, singing and dancing as I said before, Chappell Rowan plays on the over the intercom. There was my favorite moment was when they were doing just the dance shots panning around, and they panned to a group of people. I think college students at least appear college age. And when the camera panned to them, and when they realized that the camera was on them, they all started making out with each other. And and I want to be clear here. I don't mean like they paired off and like made out with each other. I mean they all smashed all of their faces together and just went ham. And the arena erupted. It was an incredible moment.
Oh, that rules so hard. Oh, I wish someone like pulled out like a smartphone just for that moment if there was video somewhere. Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah,
Oh.
and I think I think my much more low-key favorite thing was that kind of when I was walking from the parking lot into the arena, and I don't know if this is something that happens regularly at Hurricanes games. I kind of doubt it. But there were multiple like uh, street hockey setups in the parking lot. Like
Oh, that's cool.
they were like a couple of they were geared towards little kids. And I think these were like
Mm-hmm.
families that had brought them as part of the hanging out before the game type deal. But there were like multiple spots throughout the parking lot where there were kids just with little nets with sticks. It wasn't mini sticks because they were like full size sticks, but just they had little street hockey games that kids were playing in the parking lot. And as I was walking by, I was like, that rocks.
Yeah, I was gonna, because I want to say Carolina's one of the markets that's more known for tailgating in the parking lot. So
Yeah,
maybe that's a thing there.
maybe it's a thing. The other takeaway, and this is unrelated to anything that the PWHL, but I didn't really appreciate where the Carolina Hurricanes arena actually is. It's not particularly convenient, or I don't. It's not particularly inconvenient either, but it is on the edge of the NC State University campus, and it shares like parking and stuff with the football field for the university.
Okay.
And the co-tenants of the Hurricanes arena is the NC State basketball teams.
Interesting.
Men's for sure.
Makes sense.
I don't know if women's have their own smaller arena elsewhere on the campus or if they use this as well. But I was like, huh, I did not know that. And yeah, cool thing I learned.
Yeah, that is neat. One thing that obviously we have liked to talk about in the prior ones is, you've talked about the experience, talked a little bit about the game. What was the merchandise like there? Like, was there a decently, like, was there jersey representation? Was there any team representation, or was it just like kind of generic league merch and then like Raleigh specific?
So yeah, no, there was. Are you so? A bit of clarification from my end, because I'm actually going to go ahead and answer both of these questions. Are you asking about what stuff people was wearing or what they had for sale?
What they had for sale. We can talk about this, what we like jerseys was later on afterwards, but specifically for sale.
As the as you guys have kind of talked about, as the Takeover Tour has grown has gone, they've definitely increased what they have for merch. What there is that for this game, they had both team-specific stuff for the Frost and for the Charge, as well as league and event-based stuff. So like specific Takeover Tour merch, general PWHL merch, and then team-specific stuff. The problem is, I don't know if this is whose head this lays on, if this is an issue with the PWHL, an issue with the stadium, what have you. The problem is the merch stores were not physically big enough. So
oh no,
it was these tiny like glass boxes, and there was two of them, one more Frost centered and one more Charge centered on the other side of the arena.
Oh no.
And they had a decent selection of merch at either of them, but the space where the merch was so small that
I can only imagine just how bad the lines would have been.
Oh, it was
it's probably like super cramped inside them, and then the lines would be like absurd, right?
It was an absurd line. It was basically, I screwed up tactically by I found the merch store and I was like, okay, there's the merch store. This is the line for the merch store. I'm going to go get something to eat and find my seat instead of staying in line at the merch store.
Oh, Alex, no.
And because I did that, I did not get any merch because, well,
yep.
I would have, because I valued watching the action on the ice more than waiting in a line to get a jersey.
Yep, completely valid. So from what I can guess, I think that's actually an arena choice. So, because we've talked before about how like the different arenas have had their setups, like how my prime example, of course, being Rogers Arena in Vancouver, where they had like a kiosk outside the arena out in front of the building for people wanting to enter. And then they had both the main team store and the alternate team store, as well as like 3 more small booths along the concourse. Yeah. And that was just the lower bowl. The upper bowl probably would have had 1 or 2 merch stands as well. So I think that's completely on Raleigh and the building.
Because I don't think they opened up.
Shockers underestimating.
Actually, I'm fairly confident they didn't open up the main team stores for this. It was just small accessory booths. They had a decent selection. It's just they didn't open up the space for it.
Yeah, and like you said, you don't want to be spending an entire period waiting to get your merchandise, something that Benjamin and I can relate to in other areas. Shout outs to Hockey Week in Canada version 1. But then you touched on it beforehand too, and I guess I can ask directly. You hinted that there was also a lot of different jersey representation as well.
Yeah, so the thing with an event like this is you've got basically everyone. The largest jerseys for sure were definitely the Carolina Hurricane jerseys, because that's who the fans are in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, what I saw a lot of is I'm not sure which special event jersey this is, but there were purple Hurricanes jerseys that I saw a lot of. I want to say it's one like the it might actually just be Hockey Fights Cancer jerseys.
Yeah, that's what immediately came to mind for me. So,
but there was a lot of purple Hurricanes jerseys that really matched the Frost color palette. So those stood up. You of course had a decent amount of people wearing Frost jerseys or Charge jerseys, but I did see at least one jersey for every PWHL team.
Excellent.
A bunch of USA jerseys. And then as well, some college hockey jerseys.
Nice.
A few Penn State jerseys, a few other smaller jerseys from around. But yeah, it was going to an event like this is always cool because it's such a wide variety of jerseys. And then, of course, the smattering of other pro hockey jerseys.
So I have a question as well that's not necessarily Takeover Tour specific, but in prior talks when it comes to the PWHL, it's come up before that you weren't exactly following the league or necessarily a fan of the league. And if I'm completely off base, call me out right now. But in going to this game, has your opinion on it changed? And like, are you now a lot more focused on following the league and watching games and whatnot compared to before?
Hard question to answer because a bunch of
hitting her with the hard-hitting journalism. Let's go.
A bunch of my lack of interest is less about like not being interested and more about attention allotment. Not having a clear team to root for based on geography, not having as much not having that connection to something specific. And then also just not really having, a lot of times my interests lean more towards, oh, this is a really neat like thing, like being more interested in like the logistics and the how it works rather than the action on the ice. And I think a lot of that is tension based. Like I didn't have as much space to give hockey just in general this season. And I honestly can't say for certain if it's changed or not. I'm definitely going to say that if the opportunity comes to catch a game relatively local to me live, I'm going to take it. But that's not going to happen until they go to like Washington next season. Or, I mean, I guess I could make, or I guess like they go to Nashville next season. Like that's my range of places I would probably be able to go and see a game. And no, it's just, I definitely should be watching more just in terms of I really like the ambience of having hockey, and it's going to be easier to access these games. Especially now that another big part of it is that I have a new computer, and so I can actually do stuff like watch a game and play a video game at the same time. Whereas my computer had reached the point where it was no longer able to do that.
Oh, no.
So, yeah. As I'm able to kind of put more of my attention back into paying attention to hockey, I definitely think I'm going to go more into watching and actively following along with the like actual game-to-game stuff with a PWHL rather than just kind of following along with it at a league level as I have been.
Which is great to hear, especially too because being American means you still get it like free access on YouTube because every game's still streamed there. I have to basically VPN all of them. It sucks. But I do get to watch it. Plus, too, the fact that there's only like maybe one game a day is very helpful.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of the one thing is like, you know, we're all hockey sickos. If there's hockey on, there's decent chance we might be watching it. And just being able to kind of watch every team because, hey, you don't have to switch your focus around a whole lot. It's really cool. But I am glad to hear that. And most importantly, I'm glad you had an awesome time there. I'm glad you got to see the team you're rooting for win, even if it came at the expense of the Ottawa Charge and Hal. With that said, the Charge are currently winning 2-0 in the revenge game, so hoorah. We're going to quickly take a break, and we're going to get into the men's side of the game. But before we do that, just want to give a quick reminder that you can give us a follow on Instagram, Blue Sky, and YouTube, all at Neutral Zone Hotel, all one word. And don't forget to leave comments on our YouTube videos, as Jay will read them. Maybe also like them as well. And subscribe if you really like us. As well, you can let us know how we're doing at feedback@neutralzonehotel.com via email. And if you want to go talk to us directly, we are on Discord, and you can find our server at neutralzonehotel.com/Discord. We'll be right back. And we are back. So, shocker of all shockers, I'm sure everyone's well aware, the NHL trade deadline has come and passed. A lot more deals and a lot bigger deals than I think a lot of us were expecting, considering it felt like a lot of the big moves had happened earlier in the season, like Mikko Rantanen going to the Hurricanes, JT Miller going to the Rangers, so on and so forth. But there's definitely a few surprises in there. Before we kind of, I think, talk on the big moves, we can maybe do a quick little update on our specific teams, and this will be very easy. I'm a Canucks fan. They did jack shit. Well, that's kind of a lie. They traded Carson Soucy to the Rangers for a third-round pick. Woo! I'm waving my arms around like a wacky wavable inflatable arm tube, man. This is groundbreaking. Nah.
I mean, part of that is because the Canucks did
everything before
most
that.
of their business before that. Like, they solved their JT Miller, Elias Pettersson debacle.
Yep. With the with Hito getting heat, which we've covered beforehand. Like, they got the Hito, they got the first round pick, which they then immediately swapped to your team, and Vinny Desharnais, and who was the there was one more piece in that trade. I forget who.
That came over to you guys?
No. Well,
or that you sent over?
Drew O'Connor and Marcus Pettersson came from Pittsburgh to Vancouver. Vancouver sent Desharnais that first round pick, and I want to say another roster player. Maybe it was, it was like some prospect who was like nothing. Yeah. But I know Vinny Desharnais didn't last in Pittsburgh, because I think you swapped him right out at the deadline as well.
Very possible. Yes, he is a San Jose Shark.
Yeah, for a 5th round pick. I'm amazed you got a 5th for him. Holy smokes, was he even useless?
It's, the Penguins were extremely clear sellers at this deadline. Very much, it's a situation of so many teams were in the hunt that the teams that were clear sellers were really able to take advantage. And a lot of the teams that should have been clear sellers were hesitant to actually be sellers because it would have been bad vibes. Not that the vibes in Buffalo could have gotten any better, or there's any path for them to get better right now. I guess I should say, not that their vibes in Buffalo could get any worse right now, which is why they did end up trading. Yes, it was. Desharnais, Danton Heinen, and Melvin Fernstrom.
There it is, right? Danton Heinen. Forgot about him.
Danton Heinen.
Which I think kind of describes how Danton Heinen's whole tenure in Vancouver went. Yep. But
so the Penguins spent the trade deadline trading pretty much any piece that they could. The Penguins, of course, being a team without a lot of tradable pieces, but the guys that they were able to trade, they got surprisingly good value for. Maybe less surprising in terms of like what they're actually worth, but like able to get a 3rd round pick for Cody Glass, that's a nice piece of work. Able to get a 2nd for who was it that went to the Capitals?
Was it Beauvillier?
Yeah. Able to get a 2nd for Anthony Beauvillier, who went to the Capitals. That's a really nice piece of work.
Good business
Able
right there.
to flip the Penguins legend, Penguins great Luke Schenn for a second and a fourth. You know that his toughness, his spirit, his leadership, his fourth adjective that was very specific that I'm not remembering right now, was going to be worth a lot.
Truculence.
And it turns out that worth is a second round and a fourth. Definitely making that Michael Bunting trade from a few days before make much more sense from the perspective of the Penguins. I don't know if if that specific thing got talked about, but the two insiders, Cody Johnson and Frank Cervelli, I think it was Cervelli, both tweeting the exact same like string of adjectives, only for
right
about like why the Penguins made this trade, why like what the Penguins valued about Luke Schenn, only for one of the Philadelphia beat writers to like put the full quote that was emailed that like Kyle Dubas did as a mass email to like the beat writer email list a few hours later, was just a chef's kiss look at how that insider sausage is actually made.
100%.
But yeah, the Penguins sold, and because they sold, they had some cap space, and which let Kyle Dubas reacquire his Connors as part of
Dewar and
Timmins.
Oh, that's the one. Thank you.
For his first time in his Pittsburgh tenure, going back to his Sioux Greyhound roots, which is something he hadn't really done so far.
I was going to say, it's not like he can get any of the good Connors, so you just got to try and recreate one in the aggregate, right? Like, if you match Timmins and Dewar together, maybe you can get some weird amalgamation of like a Garland or maybe a Connor, like a Kyle Connor. I don't know. Just you got to make sure not to do it too much, or else you might get a Hellebuck, and that doesn't really translate well as a skater.
Yeah.
No. All right. So let's. I guess we can hop into some of the big deals. So
that's right. The big deals, like Connor Sprong
there were
being acquired by another team.
Oh yeah, Daniel Sprong.
Maybe he'll work out for them.
Yeah, or Eric Brandstrom getting picked up by a fourth team. I think he's in Buffalo now. After starting the year signed by Colorado, then getting traded to waived, picked up by Vancouver, traded to Ottawa, now to Buffalo. But there are two big ones for sure that I can think of, and I know one of which specifically wanted to talk about. So let's talk about Mikko Rantanen setting an NHL record by having the most points in a season by a player who played for three teams in 1 year, as he obviously swapped from Colorado to Carolina early in the season. Couldn't get an extension done in Carolina, so they shipped him out to Dallas, where he then immediately signed an 8-year, $12 million per extension. And I'm sure Avs fans love that. But the return was also, I think, very good for Carolina, at least in maybe a long-term perspective, as they got Logan Stankoven, someone who I am biased towards, 2 first-round picks and 2 third-round picks.
What we're going to say over the next 5 or so minutes is not particularly unique. It's something that I think that you'll be hearing from a lot of places, which is that it's a trade that the Hurricanes are exiting this trade deadline not necessarily being in a worse position than where they started the season prior to trading for Mikko Rantanen, but it feels bad if you're a fan of the Hurricanes. It feels like you made your team worse in the short term because you couldn't get a really good player that you acquired to sign with you. And I'm sure some of it already has come out, some of it will come out over the next couple of months. But the fact that you couldn't get Mikko Rantanen to sign there long term, the fact that you decided that it would be worth it to trade him at the deadline versus stick it out And part of it goes to how Mikko has played in the couple of weeks he was a Carolina Hurricane. It's seeing how Natchez has done as Colorado Avalanche, where he has been fit in extremely well as a supporting player to Nate McKinnon. It feels bad. It feels like you made your team worse, even if you aren't necessarily a loser in the grand scheme of things. It feels like you got a player who is maybe the solution to your eternal problem, which is that you're a team that puts up great possession numbers, takes a lot of shots, is good at keeping the puck out of your net, but can't really score. And you exited the trade deadline with Logan Stankoven, who does not change any of that, who is very much a prototypical Carolina Hurricane in that sense. Not a good finisher. It feels bad if you're a Carolina Hurricanes fan. I personally would have really liked to see the Hurricanes take one of those firsts that they got from Dallas and try to turn that into another player. Your best bet would have probably been to see if you could trade for Richard Raquel, just in terms of like guys who are rumored to be available that might be able to score you goals. But from what Tulsky has said, it sure seems like they didn't have a lot of time after this deal got finalized to work on that secondary deal. And like, I think because the other deal that ended up pretty complicated and going right up until the deadline and didn't get finalized until pretty late in the process was the Brandon Carlo trade, which the Penguins were the cap dump team for the players that Toronto needed to dump in order to have space to get Brandon Carlo. And like, so like that option just might not have been there time wise. If like Raquel is the guy that made the most amount of sense. There's also NHL GMs, it's their job to be more creative than us on this. Whether or not they actually do that job is immaterial, but you definitely have to have a list of guys that you're going to consider. And the fact that you weren't able to go and make a second trade after this is not great. You still need that guy that's going to score goals, and you don't have that.
Well, and based off of all reports, Carolina spent so much time trying to shop Rantanen that they basically forgot to do or realized they ran out of time to do anything else, which not a great look. It kind of makes you wonder if that's Tulsky just kind of making a rookie error as a GM, or if that's more of a Tom Dundon thing.
Yeah. So yeah, but there is kind of one point that a question that I've been thinking about is that what does an exciting deadline in the NHL look like? Especially since a lot of times we're comparing the NHL deadline specifically to the NBA and the NHL offseason specifically to the NBA, since as leagues their schedules are overlapping. They have a lot of the same mechanisms.
There's a lot of parallels and whatnot, like a lot of stuff's intertwined between the two.
They're both cap leagues, whereas like the NHL or the NFL, we don't usually see much happen at a trade deadline because, well, for reasons, the fact that players aren't players aren't super valuable, and the players that are super valuable aren't being moved at the trade deadline, and you're just as much as likely to get a good player by signing a player that another team has cut because of how the NFL salary cap works. The fact that MLB isn't a cap league means that how stuff works at the deadline is a bit different there. But I think a lot of people have, for better or for worse, been comparing the NHL to the NBA and kind of asking themselves, why can't the NHL's player movement be as exciting as the NBA's player movement? Which is, and there's a few different answers for that. Like the role that injuries play means that NHL players value stability a lot more. They value long-term contracts. There's the roster size, which means that individual players are oftentimes less valuable and less worth taking a big swing on. There's the fact that it's a hard cap league versus a soft cap league with exceptions. That means that you can oftentimes make getting a single player work if you are able to make the overall salaries work. But I do think with this Rantanen deal, it's kind of as close as you can get to that maximum level of excitement you can see from an NHL player movement, is the long-winded point I'm building towards here. And I think we have a pretty good comparison with what we saw in the city of Dallas earlier this year, where Luka Doncic, the superstar player for the Mavs, got traded out of nowhere to the Los Angeles Lakers for Anthony Davis. It's a very, I kind of want to say it's a very hockey style trade in that it's exactly the sort of trade a dumbass GM like Peter Chiarelli would have pulled. It's a move that basically everyone instantly panned. There's been a lot of reporting of the bad vibes from the Dallas front office. Fans have been in revolt. So there's a nice parallel with the Stars, the other Dallas winter sports franchise, being the team to bring in arguably the best player to move at a trade deadline in several years. And yeah, I don't think we're ever going to get a situation where Doncic trade happens in the NHL, because the equivalent player being moved is Leon Draisaitl. To purposefully send that player off is such a screw up on the part of a management team that even the worst management teams don't do that all that often. It still happens. You'll have teams galaxy the brain themselves into thinking that your young superstar is not going to be the guy to get you where you need to go. But it doesn't happen as much nowadays. But Mikko Rantanen, who's a great player, we saw moved prior to the deadline, and that didn't work out. And so he got moved at the deadline as well, which is something we almost never see happen. Certainly never see happen with an elite player. And yeah, I do think that this is just me being mad at I think kind of a discourse that has been proven false, which is that we expect the NHL trade deadlines to kind of be sleepy, kind of be unexciting. And for the past few years, they've kind of maxed out at what we could expect from an NHL trade deadline. You're never.
They've definitely over-delivered.
You're never going to get that max level Kevin Durant deciding to change teams type play, just because the economics of the sport for players and the asset value of the sport for teams is so different. But a situation like this where you have a great player moving in a somewhat surprising trade, even if it was reported that that shopping was happening beforehand, that rocks.
Yeah, 100%. Um, you mentioned earlier about what can make a great trade deadline, and I think there's another aspect as well that can do it, and those are the trades that involve like a decent name, but that surprise you. And to do so, this one is going to be for all the wrestling nerds out there. I'm going to paint a picture where we've got a ring in the middle of an arena, and inside the ring, you've got Randy Savage wearing a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey, Sting with a Tampa Bay Lightning jersey, and Lex Luger with an Ottawa Senators jersey on. You know, all three are top guys, but they're not quite at the top, and they're trying to try and figure out how to take out the top, when all of a sudden they're going to get ganged up on by Kevin Nash and Scott Hall wearing Florida Panthers jerseys. And it's an absolute beatdown. And all of a sudden, the music hits. You look at the top of the ramp and you see a person clad in yellow. It's Brad Marchand coming down to the ring, ready to help out the rest of the Atlantic Division, take down the big bads in the Florida Panthers. And oh my God, it's a heel turn. Brad Marchand rips off that yellow to reveal a Florida Panthers jersey underneath as he joins the beatdown of Matt Tkachuk and Sam Bennett. And biggest surprise, Brad Marchand to the Florida Panthers. Also, funnily enough, playing in Boston right now.
That's such a weird trade purely from the perspective of Brad Marchand is an icon for your franchise. And the best that you got for him was a second that is conditional on him, a second that can turn into his first, conditional on him playing in a certain amount of the Florida Panthers playoff games in the first 2 rounds.
Which more than likely will hit, but...
Yeah. It's one of those things where it feels like that's all you got for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it turns out that Marchand is more injured than the public thinks, and that him not meeting that condition is a very real threat, if it turns out that there was just no market for him or what have you, especially considering the pricing on some of the other players that moved at the deadline, like Anthony Beauvillier. We mentioned him. He went from the Capitals, or for the Penguins, to the Capitals for a second-round pick. That's going to be in roughly the same range as the second-round pick that went to the Bruins. The fact that it's a similar return for those two players, well, obviously that changes a bit if the conditional hits, but that's really terrible. As a return, it's just terrible. And I don't know if Marchand has been demanding a trade behind the scenes. I don't know if he was get me out of here, send me to a team that's good, what have you. Because if he was doing that, that changes the calculus a lot.
So to that point, I was listening to a couple other podcasts earlier today, and one of them brought up that just before the Four Nations, the Bruins and Marchand, and I believe this was a report that came from Marchand himself. Please don't quote me on that. I'm probably wrong. But according to it, they sat down to talk contract before the Four Nations tournament. And Brad Marchand had his number. The Boston Bruins number was 3 years at $3 million a season. And they wouldn't budge.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as you said, this is a franchise icon. And yeah, he's getting up there in years. But you know what? He's still productive. He's got 47 points on the season. He had a decent showing at the Four Nations. Yeah, he's not the fastest guy he used to be. But, Like, he still can be productive, but you basically have taken this guy who embodies the idea of a Boston Bruin and wadded it up and threw it in his face. I don't blame him for wanting to go because, quite frankly, I think that contract is insulting to someone of Marchand's caliber. Like, you want to know who else signed a contract recently for 3 years and just over $3 million? Timothy Liljegren.
Yep.
And if you want to try and tell me that the Bruins equate Marchand's value to that of Timothy Liljegren, I too would look at Don Sweeney and tell him to shove it up his rear end.
I think you're comparable. It's not exact. There's like a difference of position there, but I think if you're Marchand, your comparable is looking at the Malkin contract.
And it's not like Marchand's made a lot of money over the years. Like,
yeah,
his current contract is the one that he's made the most on. He was just over $6 million a year. Like, maybe it's just bad timing based off of when the caps go up and whatnot, but he's not made like the biggest boatload of money over time.
And part of that is kind of his arc as a player. He was a late bloomer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he was a player who became an elite player going into his 30s, as opposed to earlier in his career. And part of that's circumstance, part of that's that. But if you're Marchand, I think you're looking at like what the Penguins gave Malkin and said, yeah, okay, I'm a winger, I'm injured, but I'm your franchise icon. I'm the clear number two. I'm the clear number two. And like, I might not be a $6 million player, but I should be like a $5 million or like a $5.5 million for these 3 to 4 years.
Well, and especially with the cap going up, right? Like, it's not like they're not going to have money available, especially after moving out 4 other players during the trade deadline.
And I get maybe not wanting to be married to having Marchand in your on your roster for this period of time, especially if you think that his injuries are severe enough that it's going to hinder his ability to play effectively in the future. But this just feels like a waste. And the fact that it's Florida, a division rival, a team that you've butted heads with in the playoffs recently, the team that is the current that feels like the current heels of the league with with our boy Matt over there, and Aaron Ekblad breaking some laws, some NHL laws.
Oh, yeah. For those who maybe not be in the know, we're just going to I'll just do a quick aside. Aaron Ekblad is being suspended for 20 games due to violating the NHL's anti-doping law rules. Oof.
But on the flip side is that maybe, like, karmically it's right. Like, Brad Marchand goes to the Rat franchise.
It's the best. Well, it's the best marketing scheme you'll ever have in the NHL, right?
But it's the sort of thing where, I guess, but you should have gotten at least a condition. It be conditional first rather than conditional second, and maybe gotten a like mid-round prospect that's on track to make the NHL. Maybe not an impact player, but like something that you can say, this is a guy who might be on the roster in a few years. Just something more than what you got. And that, it feels bad, especially in the context of like what you got for Brandon Carlo.
Well, and also too, like, as we mentioned earlier, Luke Shen got a second and a fourth.
Like, it's what you got for Charlie Coyle, which was a second in Casey Middlestat, and with extra prospect and coming in and an extra pick going the other way. Like, it feels bad. if you are a Boston Bruins fan. It's not. It feels disqualifying, at least for this era of the Boston Bruins.
I'm gonna throw one more quick scenario out to you there though. Can you imagine going up against the Florida Panthers in the playoffs and they throw out a line of Matthew Tkachuk, Sam Bennett, and Brad Marchand? Whoa.
Terrible.
Right? Horrible.
You're going to get punched in the nuts.
It's awful. All right. Are we think we're done on trade deadline, or is there anything else you wanted to quickly go over?
Let's do some quick hits on the other teams, or on some of the other teams that had interesting or a lack of interesting deadlines. The Devils had a interesting deadline in that they got a lot of mediocre players in order to try and shore up a heavily injured roster. The Sharks had a lot of, I think, really interesting sells in terms of getting good value for players that did a good job rehabbing their value. Let's see. I think the Leafs actually had a really good deadline in terms of, we need a good third line forward, Scott Lund. We need a good second pairing defenseman, Brendan Carlo.
With that said, because the Leafs played Utah last night as of recording, blew a 3-0 lead, and Brandon Carlo really badly missed one of his assignments. It was the 3-2 goal. I don't know if you saw any of the highlights for it, but basically, like, Utah kind of sets up, and they fire a shot towards the net. It was kind of like a slap pass because the player is wide open in front, because Brandon Carlo decided to double team the guy on the other side of the net with his defensive partner, completely forgetting that his guy was like the one in front of the net. Just as soon as I saw that highlight, I'm just like, oh dear, Leafs fans. I hope you are. Oh, how are you feeling about Carlo now?
Some washed defensemen going for some way higher prices than I expected. Good job for you, Ducks. You got a second for Brian Dumoulin. I don't know how you did it, but you did it.
Yeah.
Actually, I do know how you did it. It's because you traded him to the Devils, and the Devils spent the entire deadline doing that. There was just some fun goalie moves. Nothing that's going to be too impactful, but what was the one I was just looking at?
Was it the Spencer Knight to the Hawks for Seth Jones? Because that's worked out pretty well.
Well, yeah, there's that one too, but there was also
Peter Mrazek to the Wings.
Peter Mrazek to the Wings. Chris Dreicher and Kaapo Kähkönen trading franchises,
right?
Or their franchises doing a 1-for-1 trade. Nothing that's going to be too impactful, but some like fun lower level goalie moves that's just fun to see. And yeah, I think that's it for stuff worth talking about from us. But the one other fun thing from the trade deadline is that Shea Weber got traded again.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Just the fun things that happen with LTIR and 14-year contracts.
You'd think after getting into the Hall of Fame that contract would be exempt from moving, but nope. The corpse still moves on. And then one more quick lighthearted thing before we go. I saw this news story last week and then got a little bit more context. Actually, just before we recorded, I saw this. So Tyler Toffoli was on a podcast hosted by his wife, Kat, and another co-host. And he was giving a little bit of backstory to a fun little bet that his teenage teammates, Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini, made with him. Sorry, I threw a bottle onto my bed and I accidentally bonked my cat who was hiding behind the blanket. Oh, she's not happy with me. Anyway, so apparently Toffoli and Smith were just sitting on like the team bus going between like practice into the rink and whatnot. And apparently Smith then pipes up and says, you know what? If all three of us score a goal tonight, you're sleeping over in our hotel room. And according to Toffoli, he was saying, like, I'm 32, I don't do sleepovers. Like, no, it's fine. It's going to be okay. Like, it's going to happen. So, we go through the game, and it's San Jose versus Buffalo. Maybe not the most gripping game of all time. We get halfway through the third period. Just before halfway in the third period, it's 3-2 San Jose. None of the three have scored. But then Macklin Celebrini pots a goal with just over 8 minutes into the period. Will Smith gets one, with just a hair under 7 minutes to go. And then, according to the podcast, Toffoli gets the puck with 2 minutes to go, empty net, snipes dead center, gets to the bench to celebrate with his teammates, and Will Smith just leans over and screams, "Sleepover! Sleepover!" And then it came out on Instagram that, they took the couch, popped it out into a bed, and Tyler Toffoli had a sleepover with Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith. And then, of course, when the co-host of the podcast asked him, like, "Did you realize that what was going on?" And if, like, and he's, as Toffoli says, no, he didn't realize. And if he did realize what was going on, he probably would have passed it off or shot it wide.
Yeah, it's the vibes of the Sharks are, for a team that is still very bad, are wonderful. A lot of that is collecting a decent collection of young players who are coming into their own. Part of it is having multiple good young players at the same time versus like the Blackhawks, who have Bedard but don't have that secondary cast around him yet in terms of young players. Part of it's just they've made good vibes players' decisions. Toffoli being one of them.
100%. Because, like, Toffoli only left the Kings, and he played with the Kings for almost, like, 9-10 years. He only left the Kings in, maybe less, maybe it was, like, 7, but at the end of 1920, like, right going into the COVID bubble, where he got traded to Vancouver. And then from there, immediately went to Montreal. And then from there to Calgary. From there to New Jersey. From there to Winnipeg. And now San Jose, all within like a 3-4 year span.
Yeah.
But you never hear a bad thing. And of almost anything, anytime he leaves one of those markets, all you hear about is just how good of a guy he was for the dressing room and just a vibes guy in general. He seems just like a really cool guy to have in your locker room, and especially as we mentioned too, like you mentioned too, like in a rebuilding team that probably just needs a good locker room vibes guy, he's probably the best option for it. I know early on in the season, Benjamin was singing the praises of that signing, and I think you're really starting to see why it's working out so well, and will hopefully work out well in the future for San Jose. Because it looks like they're primed to have a really good powerhouse squad in the next 5-10 years.
It's like they have to actually climb out of it, but I think the Sharks have a pretty solid foundation for climbing out of it, pending the development or the drafting of some defensemen.
Yeah, I mean, well, they're currently dead last again this year, so there's a good chance that they will be getting, like, some more good players. And I'm sure, like, I know it's not supposed to be the best draft class in comparison, but, like, I'm sure there's going to be some good young prospects that to pick up. And, I mean, too, they're going to have so much cap space. I'm sure they can rebuild that defense in no time, especially because I think Vlasic is up after this season. So if you can finally get that albatross off, that'd be great.
Though I think they appreciate Vlasic being around for the similar reasons for Toffoli. Like, he's a locker room guy that's been around forever. He's San Jose Shark with capital S, J, and S. They don't mind the fact that he's bad in terms of like where they are strategically. And he's been better than he has been these past couple of years, but not like as good as his contract would require him to be. Which It's fine.
All right. I think we're about done here then. Alex, you got anything to close us out with, or any final thoughts?
No, I do not.
All right. I don't really either. I'll say this. I will not be on next week because while we record, I will be in Vancouver at the Vancouver Canucks Winnipeg Jets game. I am fully expecting a Canucks loss, but at least I'll get to see the Jets, which, funnily enough, will actually mark down 6 different Canadian franchises I've seen live. But somehow, the only one I haven't seen is Toronto, and somehow I saw the Montreal Canadiens live before Benjamin, and that thought just occurred to me this morning. Granted, it was in 1999, and it was a preseason game, so I don't know if you can really call that the Montreal Canadiens, but the logo counts.
Yeah.
But
same toilet seat.
All right, and with that, you have been listening to the Neutral Zone Hotel. You can follow us on Instagram, Blue Sky, and YouTube at Neutral Zone Hotel, all one word. Like, comment, subscribe on any of our podcast videos there, and maybe rate us 5 stars on your podcast platform of choice, or a thumbs up. It does help us a lot, and you know what? We would really appreciate it as well. If you liked what you heard today, just send it to at least one of your friends. Be like, hey, check out these guys, what they talk about. I think it's great. And if they can do that, they can spread it on to one other person and spread the love. And while you're doing that, you can also tell them, hey, go check out their Discord server at neutralzonehotel.com/Discord. And as always, a huge shout out to our friend Emily Mowbray for her fantastic logo that we use on all of our album art. Take care. We will see you next time.
Bye.